Jim, thanks a lot for joining
No
us
worries.
on a hectic weekend on a Sunday
Yeah,
evening.
I mean, it's okay. No
Um,
worries. I'll be happy to help. It's just like because we have the time differences,
yeah,
that it kind of it just yeah, it's okay. No worries. I'll just try the best I can.
yeah. If you want to move around, do of course let us know.
There's no way. I'm pretty much stuck here. It's gonna be pretty scary, but it is what it is. Let's just get started.
I hope you're
I have
okay.
no
So
other.
yeah, at any point if you're uncomfortable, you can always let me
Okay.
know and we'll take a
No worries.
pause.
No worries.
Okay,
I'll try
awesome.
not to be
So a
distracted.
little bit of introduction to Jim and to the audience. Thanks a lot for jumping in again on a Sunday evening. I know I've repeated it too many times. Now, a little bit of introduction or a background to Jim is Jim has been a strategy, marketing, and tech professional with experience at large multinationals. He's handled commercial sales strategy, marketing, and project management with multi-billion dollar business divisions in both the US as well as international settings. He's worked on tech consulting for US pharmaceutical industry, public service industry, and retail clients. And he's also worked on management consulting for China markets. Jim is currently helping to build an education consulting company that cultivates global citizenship in students. He is also a part of the global digital nomad community and movement, as well as a blockchain advocate. Jim personally has been one of the earliest advisors to Partnr right from I think before the venture was even born. I'm humbled to have him here, especially on our first masterclass, to be sharing his thoughts and perspectives with all of you about the space in general and helping you all move from Web 2 to Web 3, understand the space and also adapt and be able to leverage the most out of it. Uh, Jumping right into the questions, Jim, what is Web3? Like for a foreign audience which is not very aware of, let's say, who's at a novice level, I don't know too much, but I'm just hearing jargons float around. Help me decode. What is Web3?
Thank you, Kriti, for the very kind introduction. Really appreciate it, and it's a big pleasure to be having this conversation with you and with everyone. I'm going to preface this by saying that again, I don't think any one of us are so-called Web3 experts at this point because it's such a fairly new field. Um, if it's almost like saying in the back in the 1990s that you know you're like a kind of like a internet expert, but the internet itself is a new technology. It's a new field. It's a new venture. So I'd be happy to be a part of this to really um, be discussing these topics with everyone. But it's almost like it's a co-learning experience for us all because it's a new thing, right? It's a new thing in technology. It's a new thing in the evolution and progress of human societies and human history. So going back to your question, Kriti, about what is Web3, I mean, there are many definitions about what constitutes Web3. One definition I think, and just thinking out loud, is that it's a idea that the World Wide Web, right, the www, the internet can be based upon blockchain technology, that there could be more ownership by individuals as opposed to platforms. Web3 is a nowadays it's a very cool and quintessentially hot buzzword jargon, but at the fundamental levels, I think it's about decentralization, the idea of being able to have ownership over what you do and content you create, and then leveraging the World Wide Web in order to again to make it happen, leveraging blockchain technology to make it happen. So Web3 is essentially it's a new manifestation of technology through the blockchain, through tokenization, through decentralization. It is also a manifestation of how um, mobile-based and internet-based and digitally based economics is changing over the years. And in one from one aspect, it's a change in technology platform and paradigm. On the other side, it's a change in socioeconomic actualization and platform and and um, ecosystem, I guess, if we could call it ecosystem. I think maybe again, just thinking out loud, I think another way to look at Web3 is that it's a new ecosystem of sorts. Um, do you want me to go back in history to talk about Web 1, Web 2, or is
Yeah,
that the next question?
definitely. I think that was going to be my next question, right? Because I love the way you're putting it across and resonate with the fact that, yes, nobody, I mean, it's not fair for people to call themselves Web3 experts at this point of time because it's just coming up and we're creating Web3 per se together.
Right. It's like it's happening right now as we
Yeah.
speak, essentially.
Exactly, exactly. So I think definitely I'd love for you to delve a lot more into detail. And I mean, is Web3 just a phase of the internet? I mean, of course, like you said, socioeconomically, it's a different uprise or an upbringing of sorts. And then from a technical point of view, it's an evolution as well. So if you can help us, of course, start with the history a little, understand a little bit, and then talk about how is it even evolving from both these fronts, both the socioeconomic front as well as from the technology front. It'll give the audience a more whole-rounded perspective.
Sure. Happy to I'll try to make an attempt to do that. So again, we talk about Web 3. So if since it's 3.0, right, there must be a 1.0 and a 2.0, right? A one and a two. In order to have a three, there has to be a one and two. And a lot of this terminology is semantics, to be honest, where human beings have a tendency to want to group things in a very neat, orderly fashion and manner, even though you can argue that it's a technological progression, it's a systemic progression, it is a socioeconomic progression. But as humans, we want to delineate this in very tight, neat modules. In the past, we talk about the what is it the fourth industrial revolution, right? So as a way to really help us understand what is happening with the Internet of Things, with AI, with all these technologies that are really changing our lives and our socioeconomic behavior. So it's no different in terms of the Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. But going into trying to adapt and conform to the semantics, one can look at Web 1, 1.0 as going back a couple decades. With the advent of the World Wide Web, with internet in the earliest phases in the 1980s and early 1990s, where you had this web that was essentially web read only. I remember actually I'm actually much older than I look, and I remember back in the old days when people had access to Netscape browser. This was before the Internet Explorer. Before Internet Explorer, one of my acquaintances actually he was involved with the development of the Internet Explorer
Oh
back
wow.
in the days. Um, and sometimes I say happy birthday to him when I remember his birthday. But this was back in the days of the Windows 95 Netscape Explorer, right? You literally had a lot of these websites that were static. That you go on there, you type in the URL, and then you see a page of like information. That um, I think is a Papa John's or another Pizza Hut I remember, but one of the U.S. pizza chains. They were, I think, one of the first to commercially adopt it, so that you can press a button and then order a piece of pizza. That was like revolutionary back then, where you could press a button and order something. But for the majority of the websites, if you ever lived in the 1990s, it was really static. You go on a website and you have a bunch of information. Like you read the information, and then go, aha, okay, that's it. There were a lot of. I remember back then there were a lot of websites about Jupiter and Saturn where they just post a lot of photos and the
True.
description of Jupiter and Saturn, just to give example, and that was pretty cool. And at the time, it was pretty cool. You didn't have any comment sections, you didn't have any places where you could share opinions or interact or press a button and purchase something. And then came Web 2.0. That it kind of arguably it's really hard to give a date to the demarcation period between Web 1.0 and Web 2.0. It's not kind of like the Berlin Wall, right? It's not the World War One where you can kind of have a demarcation point. It's similar to kind of the Industrial Revolution, right? It's really hard to define exactly when the Industrial Revolution started and ended. Arguably, at the end of the 1990s, early 2000s, arguably there. But again, no matter who, in terms of like it's a depending on who you ask, that date could be a little bit different, plus or minus a couple of years. But you're kind of seeing this transition where before you had these static websites where users could just go on there and read content and blogs and stuff. But then you started having more and more platforms that became more and more sophisticated. I remember I remember eBay was one of them, where you started to have the ability to go on there and click a couple buttons and then order a book, a trade items. You had Facebook was a big one, back then. I remember when Facebook started, it was pretty big. Back in the early to mid 2000s, you had this social platform, the social web, where people could actually interact and like each other's posts. Liking was a big thing back then. It's a very conventional thing for us now, but back then it was a huge thing. Going from the ability to just only look at web pages and browse content to the ability to hit a button and socially interact with the person on the other side. So Web 2 was an upgrade, so that it went from static content to interactive content to user-generated content. So I think two big areas with Web 2 is one, there's a lot more participation by the users as opposed to just statically browsing and looking at the information. And the second is that the content is no longer just generated by the web host, the webmaster. Back in the earlier AOL days, the webmaster kind of just was the one who distributed the content. It felt like New York Times, back then. But then with Web 2, you had people and users who were able to post, right? Facebook, a lot of the content is generated by the users, right? Amazon and eBay, right? A lot of the sales, if you're a shop owner on Amazon or eBay, right, you're the one who's responsible for generating the shop content. So you have the rise of social webs, the rise of web platforms, and a series of tools that people can use to essentially share their opinions, to share their day-to-day perspectives, and to really interact in a very, very hyperactive way. And suddenly, we went from static to dynamic. So that's Web 2. But
loving the way you're putting it.
Yes,
Just pausing to appreciate. Sorry.
No worries. So, but what was the problem? There was one big problem, and that being, if let's for example use Facebook as a it's called Meta now, but back in for a long time it was called Facebook. And with Facebook, right, you could generate a lot of content. You can do a lot of likes and participations and all that, but ultimately that content, right, it doesn't actually belong to you. It's actually quite a scary thought, where that content, right, does not actually belong to you. It belongs to Mark Zuckerberg. It belongs to Facebook. It belongs to this mega corporation that profited as a result of the proliferation and the advancements in Web 2.0. And the users, for the users, it was a win for the users in terms of them also being able to take some of the economic how to say benefits from the Web 2.0 ecosystem, but the majority, the lion's share of the benefits and the income was essentially controlled and centralized and operated by these web giants. And what Web 2.0 did was through Web 2.0, we eventually saw the rise of the web giants. Right, in the U.S., in North America, in the West, you had Facebook, you had Amazon, you had Google, you had what else? Apple, and all these big tech giants. And then in the East, you had folks like Baidu, right? Alibaba, Tencent. So you see the rise of these tech giants that essentially started to culminate in a way to kind of almost take over everyone's lives in a way where I think all of us have known somebody at least in our lives who cannot live without Facebook, who cannot live without Amazon, who cannot live without WeChat or Tencent. It's almost become a fabric of our lives. That's actually pretty scary. It's actually a pretty scary thought. Pause a little bit. It's a very, very scary thought. It's quite dystopian. It also feels like a real life chapter or episode of Black Mirror, where there were episodes of Black Mirror where the user was so entwined and was so immersed in a Web 2.0 like ecosystem where the users were essentially controlled by these centrally operated platforms and ecosystems and tech giants. And so that I make an emphasis of these points because that is essentially, arguably, what Web 3.0, as we know it, is trying to solve. It is decentralized to Web 2.0. It is at a very fundamental level. Web 3.0 is a decentralization movement. So it wants to allow users, allow ordinary people to really take the control back from these big corporates, these big tech giants, and really have ownership of their own data, have ownership of their own content, so that individuals, not the big corporates, not the big platforms, can take the lion's share of the profits and income in that way. But it's also dynamic. Web 3.0 is also as dynamic, if not more dynamic, than Web 2.0 in terms of the interaction, the participation. But it's a much more fair economy. From a social economic perspective, I think arguably the biggest difference between Web 2.0 and Web 3.0 is the social economic aspect. Right? From a Web 2.0 to 1.0, you can argue that the bigger jump was from a technology layer. Users became more participatory. Users became more content generated because Web 2.0 gave us more tools to generate content, to participate via communities and platforms. Whereas Web 3.0, it's arguably a transformation from the socioeconomic end, so that users can take back control over the utility, the benefits, the social economic benefits of their products, of their content, instead of it being the majority, the lion's share being taken by web giants or tech giants. It's the users themselves that are able to kind of cut out the middleman. Right? If we think about blockchain technology, a major benefit is that it allows us to kind of cut out the middleman, the centralized platform layer, and really to go from end to end, right? From the buyer to the seller, end to end, without having to go through a very centralized middle layer. And that essentially, from a socioeconomic perspective, is what Web3 is trying to accomplish. And then again, going to the technology parts in terms of whether it's using blockchain or whether it's using tokens and NFTs. Those are the tools that are used to manifest this new social economic development.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Yeah, I mean, I think from a, like you said, from a socioeconomic perspective, just the concept of trying to take away that middleman who is sort of leeching off of the end user as well as, I mean, leeching off of both sides in a way is, I think, is a massive turn given the way humanity has been functioning for ages. And like you said, going back to an analogy from Chris Dixon's post or one of his talks, I think he said if we let the tech giants sort of continue to expand the way they are expanding and manipulate the rest of the population, it's going to be like a TV or a television with just a couple of channels to switch between, and these channels are going to be the web giants, the tech giants, and we're left being extracted. So love the way that you put the whole thing or weaved it together in a story format and easy to understand format. So coming back to the removing the middleman concept or decentralizing, I think if things work out, I mean, of course, it's going to be a huge wave. We're seeing the adoption just over the past decade. In the past 2 years, I think the numbers have exponentially increased, especially during the pandemic and the emotions that
Absolutely,
are. Yeah, so I think that we're at the cusp of a major boom for sure. Moving on,
absolutely.
yeah, exactly. And it's just, I think, exciting to live in these times more than anything else.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, we're seeing history being made on our noses. Whether it's in the geopolitical realm or the technology realm or the socioeconomic realm. And as you said, Kriti, the pandemic has essentially accelerated a lot of these trends. Things that were supposed to happen maybe in a decade or 2 decades happen in 1 or 2 or 3 years as a result.
exactly. Exactly. I think this is also where, I mean, we're going to be the pre-pandemic era people and post-pandemic era people. So I think that's literally in the middle of our lives. We have this pandemic that's jumping in, taking away a couple of years. And yeah, I think we're that generation that's seeing pre-pandemic world and post-pandemic world, and it's amazing in terms of what is happening. And although there's digital adoption that's increased across the world, the divide has also, we speculate the divide to not be much because the adoption in terms of the tech when it comes to digitization is increasing massively, manifold, but
Absolutely.
it's it's not very easy to also upskill the other side. Let's say if we look at it in terms of supply and demand, any business, any sort of an equation is usually supply and demand. And and I mean, like, what I'm noticing is with the digital divide is also increasing. With digitization increasing, digital divide is also increasing, and like, this is like partners also attempting to bridge this digital divide. Like even today, I was having this session with a couple of to be professionals specifically, is also like an attempt to bridge this digital divide and push forward together and make Web3 happen. Just I think just messaging, and I this is more for the audience because like they might have been listening to you speak about so much, and I just wanted to bring these points up. So to the audience who's listening, their why they're even investing their time in is sort of clear to them. And as we move through different sessions, they're also able to grasp as to how can I even gain value out of ABC points that are being conveyed to me. So wanted to take a pause to do that. Um, any thoughts, Jim, before we move on?
I think, yeah, it is. You make an interesting point about the digital divide. I think that whenever you have new technologies, that it can work both ways, right? On one hand, it actually increased inequality because you have first movers and then you have everyone else. But ultimately, at the same time, once the technology is proliferated, arguably it inevitably increases equality. Right? It happened during the Industrial Revolution, where in the beginning you
Right.
had a lot of oligarchs and a lot of the newly wealthy uh, capitalists in Manchester and in other places, or the Andrew Carnegies of the world. But ultimately, once that technology proliferates, once that ecosystem gets built out, you know, ordinary people and more people get to benefit from this, and you do actually see a flattening out of the benefits and distribution over the longer term. So that divide is there, but I do the optimistic side of me thinks that divide will be closed. It gets closed and more so as these technologies and paradigms become more commonplace and everywhere.
Definitely, definitely agreed. So moving on, let's. I mean, also because it's not super clear as to what is Web3 and what is not. How decentralized do things need to be? The magnitude of decentralization. So these are things that I think, as a space overall, we're figuring things out. And so, just for the audience to just to help the audience get comfortable with the with even trying to distinguish between what is Web3 and not, we have some phrases here. So I think we'll go through it one by one. Let's say, for example,
Sure.
NFTs and tokens. Why is it Web3 and why is a centralized front end or a centralized storage mechanism not Web3? Can you help decode that to the for the audience?
Sure. So I think a lot of us have heard about the terms NFTs and tokens, right? With blockchain and everything, and just gets mixed up with Web 3.0. So what makes Web 3.0 interesting is that users and developers, builders, people alike can now kind of own pieces of the infrastructure, can take more ownership. And NFTs or tokens are kind of the currencies or manifestations of such an ownership. So again, if you think about Web 3.0 in terms of what the key themes are, it's decentralization, it's ownership, and users and builders. Um, so through a token can be fungible and non-fungible. So I'll explain this a little bit in more detail. A fungible token is something that could be can get traded without having unique properties. So for example, a rupee is a fungible token, arguably, because one rupee, whether I have it, you have it, right? It can be traded, it can be interchangeable. But a baseball card, for example, of Babe Ruth, is signed in 1925 by Babe Ruth himself, would not be a fungible token. It would be a non-fungible token because it's unique, right? There's only one baseball card that was signed by Babe Ruth in June 14th, 1925. So that is a non-fungible token. Also, actually, I don't think Babe Ruth. I would say maybe. Oh yeah, so he was in the 1920s. I'm just making an example. Maybe December 31st, 1926 ish, something like that. Um, so non-fungible token is something that's not it's not interchangeable with other items. So it has unique properties, and this is great for creators in the Web 3.0 space. Because imagine if you're an artist, right? In the past, you put in you created content that was great, but Facebook or Amazon was able to profit a lot from the proceeds of your sales. And the content that, let's say, you uploaded into Facebook or another platform, right? you didn't actually have the ultimately the full rights and ownership of that. But with non-fungible tokens, and by that it's also synonymous with the acronym NFTs, right? NFT is an acronym for non-fungible tokens. With with NFTs, it allows for uniqueness. It allows for uniqueness. It allows for control. So if you're an artist, if you're a musician, right, you're a content creator, you now have the technology, the tools to really make your music, make your art really unique, and put it in a way that only you can kind of I don't want to quote sound like I'm quoting Marx, but you're now controlling the means of production, right? Actually both the means of production and also the fruits of production as well.
Yes, the
And that
creator, as the person who is creating the art, creating whatever you're doing, you're also controlling it instead of letting the middleman control in
correct,
general
correct.
sense.
And in a way, this is a little bit socialistic in a way. Again, I feel like if Karl Marx were to be transported to today, he would love something like this. If Marx were to see Web 3.0,
Yeah,
I bet Marx would rejoice over this. Marx was a terrible economist. He didn't really fully, arguably, understand or fully get it right. But ultimately, you can argue that his heart was in the right place. And someone like Marx would probably really enjoy this. Just to give one example. So going back to NFTs and tokens, I think that this again it gives again just to summarize, it gives NFTs and tokens are essentially currency. You can think of them as currency. You could think of them as items, right? That could be used to represent the trading and the transfer value from creators and users to their audience. So I'll use another example. I think Snoop Dogg. I mean, not, never been too much of a fan of his music, but he was a very memorable musician. Right? Snoop Dogg
yeah,
recently, um, he and I forgot this other country artist's name. They've produced music that were basically packaged as NFTs to the audience. Before in the old days, right? If you're a musician, right, you had to go through a record company, right? There was a lot of pirating with these record companies. I think back in the '90s, you had a lot of these like pirated CDs and music. Napster was brought down because of this. Um, Things got a little bit better with streaming, right? So you can think of like kind of the music CDs are kind of synonymous with Web 1.0. It was a very static period, and then you got the streaming music with iPods and Apple and all that, which is great, but Apple kind of controlled, right? You went from a record label to Apple, so the tech giant ended up controlling the music that Snoop Dogg and others could produce. But now Snoop Dogg and the other artists are saying, no, 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 we don't actually need Apple to control our means of production. Just to quote Marx again, we can do it ourselves. We can the artist, him or herself, can control the means of production and the distribution of that value, manifested through a non-fungible token, manifested through a token, a coin or a token of value that could be passed on from the creator to his or her audience and buyers. I probably may not have covered everything. It's not exhaustive. In this, there are other use cases in this Web3 ecosystem for NFTs and tokens. But in a nutshell, again, it allows the creator, the content creator, whether you're a musician, you're an artist, you're a writer, you're a blogger, you are a just thinking aloud, a sports person. There are actually a lot of trading, like trading cards as well. Just to give some examples, but there are a lot more use cases that are there to really take advantage of the manifestations behind NFTs and tokens.
Absolutely. I think it makes absolute sense. And thanks for walking the audience through multiple use cases as well, Jim. It helps, I think, definitely picture the whole thing better. And NFTs and tokens itself as a concept, the reason they are a part of Web3 itself, again, to add to what Jim said, is uh, Web3 enables co-ownership, so fungible tokens being a model of co-ownership, I mean, a representation of co-ownership or I mean, a network being co-owned. And also with NFTs, I think, again, the fact that you own something and it's so unique. And going back to examples that Jim has mentioned, saying a creator is able to own their piece of work, and that is why they don't necessarily need a middleman to do the branding for them. If they own it, they can do the branding and also, be earn returns in a similar fashion as well. So throughout the course, I mean, since you all have opted for the level one course, you all will be going through all of these jargons in detail if you aren't already familiar. And centralized front end simply mean, like, for instance, going back to Apple controlling the distribution or Apple controlling the receptiveness for the music itself. So that is centralized versus the decentralization that Jim spoke about, and we've picked, I think, two particular phrases here, which is NFTs and tokens and centralized front ends, and spoken about it. The others, you all can look through it, and we will cover. You all will be able to understand it a lot more clearly as we move through the course. So, in the interest of time, we will move forward with the next bit of content that we've planned for. But we will be sharing this material right after this session. You can take a look. And throughout the level one course, you'll be understanding a lot about cryptocurrency, transactions in the blockchain, DAOs, and other concepts, which will help you draw a clear distinguishing. I mean, draw a clear picture as to what the socioeconomic change is bringing about and what the technology change also looks like. Tech is facilitating the socioeconomic change rather. So moving on, Jim, the next question that I do have for you is, what is the metaverse? So metaverse is another jargon that's been floating around quite a bit, and how is that? Is it connected to Web3? Can you give us some examples?
So, good question. Sometimes the term metaverse and Web3 are almost used synonymously, but it's arguably not the same. It's kind of like you kind of see overlaps between the two, but they're not exactly the same. According to venture capitalist Matthew Ball was one of the people who he ran a blog for a long time, and he was the one who really, in a way, Christianized the word metaverse, and he termed it as a sort of like a successor state to the mobile internet. That was how
Ah,
he
interesting.
made that distinction. You know, I'll give a more like academic definition of a metaverse. So a metaverse is kind of like it's a digital realm, a digital universe of sorts that combines social media with virtual reality, augmented reality, with crypto, blockchain, Web3, and even stuff like gaming. It just kind of puts everything together. Metaverse is another one of those terms that's very hot right now. That's very much a buzzword. So it actually has a lot of definitions, and And I think for many different people, it may mean a little bit differently. But ultimately, it's almost like a jumbling of everything that we know together into this one universe together, and let's see like how if we can just make it happen. So it's a combination of social media, of gaming, of virtual reality, of augmented reality, of crypto slash blockchain slash everything Web3 and put together. So it's a virtual universe of in which people can have be connected and have experiences with. And I'm not sure if this is a clear definition. Let me try this again. So a metaverse essentially would, on a more just digital level, have three key components. One, it needs to have like an interface, a set. If you're a mathematician, it needs to have like a set interface. It has like a kind of a domain. The second component is that it needs to have within these domains avatars, right? Representations within that set space. Those avatars could be, funny bubbles or even, even cartoons or digital pictures that really look like who you are. And then the third component is what's so-called ownership. Like this goes back to Web3, where we talk about decentralization, we talk about content creator control. So again, this is the part where Web3 kind of, in a lot of ways, overlaps with the metaverse. Metaverse is a lot about individual digital ownership. And when you combine the virtual interface with the creation of avatars, representation of people in a digital space, with the digital ownership through Web3, then I think if you put all these three concepts together, then you get what we call kind of the metaverse, essentially. So again, it's a virtual interface combined with avatar digital representation of a physical being or person, combined with Web3 Web3 backed digital ownership of goods and services and value. And we put that together, and that's a very powerful
Oh,
concept and a powerful combination.
yeah, absolutely. Very powerful combination, like you're putting it. A question out of curiosity: how do you think, how far do you think we are from the kind of metaversal experiences you're talking about becoming the norm? So, like you mentioned, the next step to the mobile sort of interactions, from traditional to mobile, and then from there to the metaverse. Uh, how far do you think we are away from that being the norm, like mobile today is the norm?
I think it's going to be driven by different generations. I think that this newer generation, the generation was born after 2000, are going to be very quick at adopting this. Just like, I'm from an earlier generation. I remember many of my friends would be immersed in games like World of Warcraft and StarCraft. Back then, these games are still popular, but back then it's super popular. It's like, it catches on. And what I think really is going to drive this metaverse concept of movement is gaming. And we live in an interesting era. That's also, again, accelerated by the pandemic, in which esports, gaming as a sport, is more popular than actual sports. And these esport venues and events arguably draw in more revenue, more viewership than like a traditional basketball game or a football match, arguably speaking. So I think with the newer generations, younger generations, it's going to probably catch on faster, driven by gaming, driven by just, again, this is a generation that's grown up, right? knowing what Bitcoin is, knowing what Ethereum is, having grown up with digital wallets themselves. It's going to be harder, arguably, a little bit more for the older generations. Like in my generation, even the generations earlier, it's just going to be much harder for adoption. Just like how when the internet started, right? There were many who were imagine born in the 1920s, 30s, or earlier who were still reliant on paper and pen for a lot of for just writing. Back in the old days, it was actually really hard for people to transition from writing to email. That was a big transition back then. Nowadays we take email for granted, right? We would take word processors for granted. But it wasn't that case back then. So it is a big move. It's a big jump. Uh, I think it's going to be adoption is going to vary generationally speaking. I think the adoption is going to be primarily driven by this younger generation that's like post 1995, post 1996, post 2000 in terms of birth. I think that things will catch on more and more. You're going to see more commerce that is based on this metaverse concept. I think that you're going to see a lot more people are just going to be hanging out via avatars on a metaverse per se.
Got it, got it. Yeah, that um, makes a lot of sense. And also, one thing is, I feel like we've covered quite a bit of content for, let's say, an amateur who's not too aware to be able to consume as well. And there's a lot of fine line between the internet, Web3, as well as the metaverse itself as a concept, because it's an interweaving of similar things being put together. So for the audience, maybe like to summarize or to help them understand a lot more clearly, can we talk to them about the difference between the internet, Web3, and metaverse?
Sure. I'll try to make a attempt for in terms of the internet. So these are all related. We actually talked a lot about, during today's session about internet, about Web3, about the metaverse. In the most simplistic fashion, you can think of Web3 as the decentralized version of internet, a decentralized version of internet, where in which you have blockchain technology, you have decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, that are
Mm-hmm.
serving individuals, allowing individuals to take ownership of their means of production in order to take the most benefit from their actual content creation. The
Got it.
metaverse is, again, you can also look at Web3 as one of the key components to the metaverse. And earlier we defined the metaverse as you know having a virtual interface that is driven by VR technology, AR technology, augmented reality, and virtual reality, having individuals digitalize themselves via avatars, having that in manifestation, and then having the Web3 layer as a way to for individuals to really uh, kind of define the social economics that happens within this metaverse. So the metaverse is arguably it's a bigger bubble, and the Web3 kind of intersects in a major way with this bigger bubble. And Web3 kind of tries to define how users can really how users within the metaverse can really interact and derive value and transfer value with each other and with other organizations. So another way to think of it is I'll try to use a more another example. You can kind of think of the metaverse as a super app, right? Nowadays we have like super apps like
Ah,
WeChat,
interesting.
like what's another super app what's a super app that you use in India? Um, like PayPal is also like becoming a super app as well. But one of these like super apps, um, or like Amazon is kind of like a super appy platform as well. You can think of like metaverse like almost like a super. It's like a super app where you have AR, VR, you have social media, you have Web3, you have cryptocurrencies and blockchains and everything. So maybe not the best analogy, but the you get just what metaverse. It's just we're just jumbling a lot of things together. But Web3 is a it's a vertical that really defines the social economics and or tries to define the social economics and tries to define how people within the metaverse and organizations within the metaverse can really interact with each other and transfer value in each other.
Thanks, Jim, for the clear distinction. I think it's important to like wrap our heads around. It takes a little time to actually understand the difference very clearly and wrap our heads around each of it. But yeah, thanks for walking us through that. Let's take a pause. We've been speaking for a while. Let's see if the audience has any questions. If you guys have any questions, feel free to clear in the chat. Um, we'll take a couple of maybe a 10-second pause before we move on. I see one question on the chat, which is what kind of changes can we see in networking technology in the context of Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3? I think partially Jim has covered, but Jim, do you want to like um, answer this question again? Like to Harsh has asked this question.
So
What
what?
kind
So the question is what changes in networking technology? Um,
Yeah, with respect to networking technology, what are the changes that have happened in the context of Web 1, Web 2, Web
so
3?
it's a good question. I think arguably one thing that we're seeing is this acceleration from 4G to 5G to 6G, where I think that in terms of as far as like networking base layer technologies go, that advancement to 5G and 6G is going to really also from a technology layer drive the adoption for something like the metaverse. Because if you're, I think, Guri, I also want to go back to a previous point that you made is that the is that yes, it's proliferating, but I still do see some technological constraints as far as the metaverse goes. I mean, imagine if you're in Kenya, in Nairobi, Kenya, and or even in Southeast Asia or in places, some places in India as well. The sometimes you may not have the best network connections, or it could be just 3G, right? There are a lot of places, for example, in Southeast Asia, where it's 3G, as it's not even 4G, and that really makes it hard, to really manifest a 3D avatar that could interact with other avatars on a massive scale in terms of what the metaverse as we know it. So the I think the advancements in 5G and 6G technologies will really help to push the technological adoption by enabling more, uh, just technologically enabling more and more people to be onboarded. And so the more advanced and the more adoption by telecom providers with 5G and 6G, it makes it more affordable, right, for anyone from Kenya to Indonesia to Bangladesh to go on there, have a connection, and really reap the benefits of a true metaverse, Nowadays, it's still, I'd argue that we're getting there, but we're not there yet. I mean, if you're in Singapore,
Yeah.
sure. If you're in Delhi, in Bangalore, yes. But
Mhm.
if you're in a remote village somewhere in Sumatra, in Indonesia, probably not, right? So that as standards become, 5G, 6G standards become more clear, as the 5G and 6G gets rolled out more and more, we arguably can more and more so reap the benefits of a true metaverse because it lowers the cost of participation for the metaverse. So I'm not sure if I answered the question, but that's just one take on the question. It's a great question,
Together.
by the way.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Harsh. And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to key it in. Okay, I see another question, which is what are your thoughts on cancellation of metaverse project and how it affects the people who've already set footprint in Web3 surrounding metaverse project? So I wouldn't call metaverse as a project, but I'm trying to understand Akshay's question. So, I mean, so I'm reading it out again. What are your thoughts on the cancellation of metaverse project, and how would it affect people who already set footprint in Web3 tech surrounding metaverse? So I think, I mean, what if also like adding a little context to the question? Um, a lot of governments are not necessarily, they don't necessarily understand Web3. They don't understand, I mean, now India is adopting digital rupee, and blockchain is being used as well. But let's say if in like the most dystopian scenario, if metaverse and Web3 were to go away, how would it affect people, is essentially what Akshay is trying to ask, I guess.
It's interesting. Well, I guess what would happen if the internet were to go away? Will we survive? Yeah, most likely so. Um, but ah, good question. I think it's something we want to revisit again, maybe in 5 years or 10 years from now, with more widespread adoption. Because the whole again the whole metaverse, it's just starting. It's almost like asking what would happen if the internet were to suddenly go away in 1992. I feel like we have not reached the point where uh, we see people are reaping the maximum benefits from the metaverse. I think it's still going to take a few years or even more for more and more people, especially the younger generations, to really be fully immersed in this. And we can probably revisit it again in 5 or 10 years from now. Um, but I think what would be missing if there's no metaverse, I think again that's I think that's so here's my take on it is that I think the metaverse allows us in currently in the 2020s, in the era of great uh, geopolitical and social economic upheavals, to for ordinary people from Kenya to Bangladesh to uh, Canada to the UK to India to really connect in some meaningful way, despite pandemics, despite geopolitical global fissions, despite socioeconomic rising inequalities. It allows people to interact in a way that's arguably quite egalitarian. And so I think I'm going to argue that metaverse is a peacekeeping mechanism as well. Having the metaverse allows the world to be a more peaceful and prosperous place, just like how the internet, right? Even how Web 1.0, when it started, helped to promote and help to jumpstart a period of global economic prosperity. That was also that also allowed it to be a driver of global peace as well. So I argue the world will be a little bit more dangerous without metaverse.
Got it. Thanks, Jimmy. I mean, so to the audience, addressing the audience, we're on top of the hour. So I think let's ask Jim if he's comfortable with maybe 5 more minutes. Jim, we'll take one or
Sure,
two more questions and
sure.
then.
I'm at like 4% battery in my my device, but I can take one or two more questions, no problem. Bring
Okay,
them
so
on.
one more question then, and we'll have to wrap up. So Akshat Saxena asks, what's the future of NFTs in India and in the rest of the world? How will it impact the global economy?
So I mean, I'm not from India, so I defer this to you, Kuti, and other um, others from India. Um, I think I don't want to get into politics or geopolitics. That could be dangerous. I
Right. No,
think
no, we'll address
that's
it more from a global scenario.
sure
Just
from a global scenario. So the question is, how will what do I think about the or what do we think about the future of NFTs, right? In a India and also global setting, right? I just want to make sure I got the question right.
Yeah, Jim can hear you.
Okay, so the question is, what do we think about the future of NFTs?
Yeah, correct. The question is,
Okay,
what's the future of NFTs and how will it impact the global economy?
got it. Okay, uh, I think that's well. I want to try to say things that I doesn't get me into trouble. Um, I think a lot of the economic drivers could adjust. I can imagine, 10 years from now in a business school in Mumbai where the professor would have a class, economics professor would have a class on NFTs. There will be a class on NFTs and
Interesting.
the economics of NFTs and how that works. And because it's not fully, I don't think we're fully at that point yet, but we'll get there. Eventually, we'll get there. Right?
Yeah.
There are classes there are courses in universities around the world about the economics of commodities of petroleum. There are courses in the world about the economics of you name it, automobiles, right? Traditional industries. There are, I think, a couple of years ago, what was hot were these classes about the economics of the internet, the digital economies. So I think it will be there. I think right now, what's really um, we are
I think Jim, you're frozen for me. I'm not sure if it's right. Jim, we've lost you. And he was saying 4% battery, so I'm thinking probably that. Um, so yeah, we'll give Jim some time to jump back in. But given that we're on top of the hour, and to all the folks that who've joined in on a Saturday evening after like having a 6 day university, after attending university for 6 days, really happy to see you all here and looking forward to meet you all in person on Monday, that's tomorrow, to delve into the course a lot deeper. Thanks for attending again. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot. Discord is going to be the primary means of communication for us. And even the emails that we're rolling out, we're going to minimize on that. And so before the sessions, you can catch us, catch announcements on Discord. Prerequisites and everything else will be communicated on Discord. If you have any questions, please go jump in there and ask us, and we'll help you out. We're a bunch of folks who are ready to help you out. You just need to start engaging to get some benefits. I think as prerequisite for tomorrow's session, have your MetaMask wallet installed. We've sent that over in an email, but I'll also be posting it on Discord right after this call, so y'all can take a look at it. And I don't think all of y'all who've signed up for the level 1 course are into Discord as yet. So please do jump into Discord. I will be posting the link to join the Discord in a bit in yeah, just posting the link to join Discord in a bit um, on the live chat before we close. So those of you who haven't jumped into Discord, please do. We've just keyed in the link to Discord on the live chat. And if you have any questions, of course, feel free to ask. Apart from that, I hope you all enjoyed this session and it was fun learning about different new concepts in general. If yeah, you can always reach us at um, yeah, you can always reach us on Discord if you have any questions/queries. But this was fun for me talking to Jim, and I'm sure he's enjoyed chatting as well. Probably his laptop has died down and he's not been able to join us back. But thanks again, and see you all tomorrow. Rangu, we're good to close the live stream.